First up, we're talking about the rise of aging gamers. And Dan, you've been doing some independent research about this, gathering some facts, as an old man would. And you're here to tell us about aging gamers, silver surfers, but for games.
The silver surfers of video games. This is a subject close to my heart, as you say, as an old man. It's something that I think about a lot. Is this idea that I'm a gamer or I play games, whichever terminology you want to align with, and I am aging. I'm pretty much a 40-year-old, which, when I think back to kind of my childhood and my relationship with video games and kind of, I guess, the stereotypical lens of people who play games, it's still seen by many as something for kids. And I think about why is that and how is that changing and what does that mean for me as a 40-year-old person. And the way I see it is video games in the home were only really sort of viable at the earliest in the 70s when Pong was the first kind of home video game that anybody would have, and obviously that was the first. It wasn't ubiquitous by any means, and so before then, you didn't really have anybody growing up with video games. I was born in the very early 80s, and that was the kind of the decade that saw Donkey Kong, Tetris. Towards the very end, we had the NES and the Game Boy emerging, which kind of about the age that perhaps I'm developed and mentally aware enough to embrace with these kinds of things, and that captures my interest. So I feel very privileged that I've kind of been on that very early wave of the gaming journey. In the 90s, we had kind of Sega, Genesis, Mega Drive coming around, and mid to late 90s was the dawn of kind of PlayStation, and obviously throughout that time as well, PC gaming is always building a bit of momentum. And so then I think, so I was there effectively at the dawn of it. And then if I compare myself to, say, my parents, who kind of born in the 50s and the 60s, like they were already 30 plus years old when the first games consoles came around, so they didn't have anything to engage with as children. And games are great, games are fun, they are addictive and they're enjoyable and they're creative. So why am I going to stop engaging with that? And so I don't, and I keep bringing it with me. And the older I get, new games come about. The people who make the games are getting older. A lot of my peers kind of had that same relationship, and they've gone into the world of developing games. So now we're seeing the evolution of game content, also kind of perhaps being somewhat in tune with people of all ages. So that's, I guess, kind of my hypothesis on the idea that actually there isn't a young demographic for gaming. There is an aging demographic for gaming because we're taking it with us.
So do you think that in like 50 years time that in the nursing homes there's going to be Halo LAN parties? Is that where we're going?
Yes, I do. Whether there'll be LAN party, because that is one of the things I do think about is kind of the engagement with kind of online multiplayer culture. Perhaps you disconnect a bit from that. Certainly, I mean, that's purely anecdotal from my perspective. You're not as connected and competitive because you're busy, you're old and slow, and getting owned by teenagers isn't as much fun as it used to be. But the types of games will evolve and develop, and now we're very much in a time of really like, we've got all sorts of games, not just multiplayer, high reflex competitive games. We have strong narrative games. We have kind of AAA cinematic. We have cooperative games and those sorts of things. You'll like we do with film and music. You'll want to re-enjoy again, and the new games will also be developed to appease to those audiences. So I'd like to think in a few years' time I'll be in my retirement home, still with probably some kind of oversized controller for my decaying body to still engage with.
Are you 40 yet, Dan?
Very, very soon I am.
I mean,
Yes.
you're not even 40 yet, and
No,
life begins at 40, so you're not
Exactly.
technically.
Absolutely.
I'm negative 9 years old next week. I wanted to ask you about the way that you think this reflects on, and you mentioned it a bit there, about the way that it reflects on the creators in the industry, because I don't think that video games necessarily reached the absolute heights of true maturity as an art form completely yet, but there's definitely been a trend in AAA towards being more reflective of those kind of adult experiences, I guess. And I think about, the last couple of years, there's been almost like the rise of the dad game in things like Last of Us and God of War. Like, the stories of those games are clearly informed by people who have been fathers. And I guess as people get older and, carry this hobby with them into even older age, we can hopefully expect an even broader spectrum of life experiences to be represented on those kind of fronts.
Absolutely. 100%. The parenting is obviously something that comes with aging, and Activision actually did some research on this a couple of years ago, and by all accounts, 71% of mothers play games in some form or another. And that incorporates mobile and all sorts of games, and you can imagine that's kind of those pockets of time that maybe you get when the child's asleep, but I'm not going to move. What will I do? Well, I'll play a game on my phone or grab a Switch. And equally, YouTube Google did some research, specifically researching their gaming audience, and 47% of YouTube gamers are also parents. So there's a huge demographic of people and that's on YouTube. So that's engaging with games media rather than necessarily game playing itself. So yeah, exactly like you say, there's been a rise of, let's say, dad games and parenting games and all sorts of things. I think that's kind of like perhaps one of the best examples of that is The Last of Us, which has a whole kind of adopted parent vibe and really, really strong narrative elements. And that's a super strong trend at the moment, and like I say, there's still a lot more to be explored for sure. And related is and it's something I'm not a parent, and we all know I'm averse to any such responsibilities, but I am married, and games is a significant part of my married life. So myself and Andrea, my wife, we will play games in much the same way as a couple, the stereotypical couple sit down, watch a movie. We do that, but we will also sit down and play through a game together. And again, kind of the narrative games really suit that kind of environment, and we get invested, we get excited about release dates. We'll watch the awards and things like that. So yeah, it's a big part of adult life for some, and I only envisage that as the wedge of gamers that are growing up moves along, that will just get more and more so.
Yeah, I remember back in the day we used to, in the era of like Grand Theft Auto lawsuits, people used to talk about, in 20 years there will be, people in Houses of Parliament, people in Congress who play games, as people get older, and that's kind of started to happen. Like, there's very famously last year, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez playing Among Us on Twitch, and there's many more kind of closet gamers in politics, which is a good thing. But yeah, I guess, like you say, people are just carrying it with them from a younger age and maintaining it, essentially, because the industry is growing up alongside them.
Absolutely, yeah, and it is. I kind of mentioned the privilege I feel having. It's not very often you get to witness the entire lifespan of an industry, and I feel like with video games, mobile phones, the internet, people of my age, we've been there at the very beginning, and it's certainly not going away anytime soon. So to be able to witness the entire extent of that, and yeah, exactly as you say, people in positions of authority. I run a team, but there will be politicians and members of parliament that will be in a few more years avid video games fans taking that with them. The perceptions will slowly shift. It's the media loves a scathing headline about the damages of video games, but that's what happens. That's what happened with TV and film and music, and this is the video games are the new kind of rock and roll at the moment, but they will eventually become just the norm for sure.
And what about somebody who maybe hasn't got that historical nostalgia? Like if somebody has a parent or even a grandparent, I suppose, who is like interested in games, like what are some games that you think they should start with or genres they should check out?
I actually think that's a whole potential almost discipline or genre of game that's these kind of perhaps bridging games that can. I mean, Microsoft recently did a campaign around this about kind of connecting, particularly in lockdown when there are grandparents perhaps at home not able to see the family, and using games to connect with them. I do think that's an area for simple games that we can use to onboard perhaps people non-native games players. A modern new AAA title, you've got a controller with 12 buttons on it, analog sticks. They are complicated, and it's only if you're native to it that it's simple. And there are people who see the notoriety of games and they see, that my family are really into this, I want to participate, but that's a big barrier to entry. So I do think there are obviously simple games there. Mobile is a great example of this. The demographics for mobile games just skew way older as well because they're so accessible. So yeah, if there maybe the avenue for that is retro games. We go back to the Super Mario's where you had jump and that's about it, and that's the on ramp for new people. But definitely room for innovation in that arena for sure.
Yeah. And are there any other stats that you've gathered as part of your research that you want to share with us?
I guess this is all kind of driven by my opinion and personal experiences. So I have looked into this a bit, and there's a research organisation called Savanta that did some research. 86% of people aged 16 to 69 have played a game in the last year. 54% play on most days, and of that 54%, there is 46% of those people are over 40. So that's a significant chunk of people who perhaps people's default assumptions wouldn't be included in these kind of stats. The ISFE, who are kind of a trade organisation focused around Europe, the average age of a video games player in Europe is 31. And 38% of games players in Europe are over 35, 22% over 45. So again, that's kind of echoing that stat that it's not just teens and young 20-year-olds. There are players of all ages. And there was also a study done by the AARP, which I don't remember the name of the acronym. But it's an American kind of retirement-focused organisation, and 44% of over 50s play at least once per month. So, yeah, there is a huge audience here, and I think that's where you have large audiences, and where there's opportunity to focus on a niche. There's opportunity for games businesses, games publishers to actually cater perhaps a little bit more for this aging gamer demographic at all ends of the spectrum. These people are strategically, they're an extremely viable market. They're influential. They have disposable income, and particularly start looking at the retirement age. People have time, and they need to fill it. So, that's some hearty stats to back up this idea that I have. And certainly something to dig into a bit further, I think.
If you're old, let us know in the chat.
And Adam, you're no spring chicken yourself. You said it's your birthday soon. Did you mention that?
I know. Yeah, it's my birthday next week, and I'm already past the age that you would. I'm past my prime. Let's leave it at that.